I was reaching for the spinach dip when the world stopped. Not because I dropped the plate. Not because someone tapped the mic or said my name. It was her eyes, hazel, glassy, rimmed with disbelief, looking at me from across the room like I was something she'd buried long ago, only to see clawing its way back out of the ground. Let me rewind. 3 years ago, I was someone's husband. Pretty quiet one, admittedly. My name's Erwin. Yes, laugh all you want. It's not flashy. I'm not flashy. I've always been more background character than leading man. I fix what breaks, pay bills on time, and never skip oil changes. My wife, Qley, used to call me an old soul in an aging cardigan. And I guess she wasn't wrong. We were married for almost 14 years. No kids. Just one rescue cat named Marvin, who hated loud noises and everyone except me. We had a rhythm. She'd hum when she cooked. I'd shuffle around the kitchen, pretending to help. Friday nights were for takeout and terrible sci-fi reruns. Sunday mornings meant crossword puzzles and her teasing me for not knowing basic plant names. But then she changed. Not overnight. It was slow, like a faucet drip behind a wall. Quiet but constant. At first, she'd come home later. Then the smiles grew thinner. Eventually, even her side of the bed felt cold when she was lying in it. I thought maybe it was stress, burnout, hormones, anything but what it actually was. Until one Tuesday, I came home early from my shift and heard laughter upstairs. Male laughter. Our bedroom door was cracked open just enough. I stood there like a statue while my mind tried to convince me it wasn't what it clearly was. I remember thinking, maybe it's a TV show. Maybe Marvin knocked something over. Maybe. But it was her voice. Her real voice. That tone she used to reserve for just us. I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I just walked back outside. Drove around for an hour. Bought gas I didn't need. Then I sat in my car in the garage for another hour after that, staring at the steering wheel like it had betrayed me too. That night I asked her directly. She didn't lie. She just nodded. Said nothing. Just stared at me like I was the final scene in a sad movie she'd already watched too many times. She moved out 2 weeks later. No drama, no affair partner moving in. She just vanished. She left behind her toothbrush, a coffee mug with Queen Bee printed on it, and a note with 4 words. I need to feel again. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I couldn't even cry properly. I just cleaned the house, canceled our anniversary dinner reservation, and started sleeping on the couch because the bed was too big now. And then nothing. No calls, no emails, no Marvin. She took him too. For 3 years I disappeared. Not in a mysterious way, just muted. I transferred to a smaller branch of our company out in Idaho. I stopped posting on Facebook. I learned to cook badly. I bought a fish. Named him Marvin also. Then last week, my new manager said we were invited to a regional work event in Denver. A networking thing. I almost said no, but the hotel had free breakfast, and I hadn't seen a real city skyline in ages. And that's where it happened. I was standing by the snack table, looking for something that didn't have goat cheese in it when I turned around and saw her. Qley. Same red curls, different energy. Expensive clothes now, tighter jawline, bolder eyeliner. She was standing with a group of people holding a wine glass mid-laugh. And then she saw me. Her entire face shattered in a second. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her fingers trembled. The wine glass tilted. And then tears, real ones, fast, ugly, the kind you don't plan. Everyone around her fell quiet, looking between us like they'd walked into the wrong part of someone else's movie. And I just stood there, dip in one hand, plate in the other, heart full of things I'd buried too deep for anyone to ever notice. That's when I knew, whatever life she built after me, it wasn't as solid as she thought. She didn't run. She didn't turn away. She just stood there, locked in place like her body had frozen mid-function, as if her mind had disconnected and needed time to reboot. And for those first seconds, I wanted to believe her tears meant something. Remorse, maybe. Regret. But I didn't let myself move toward her. I stayed where I was, near the buffet table, clinging to that flimsy little plate of crackers like it was some kind of emotional shield. Qley blinked rapidly. Her colleagues looked at her, confused, trying to piece together what was happening. One of them, some younger guy in a blazer way too tight, placed a hand on her back. She jerked away like his touch had burned her. I guess that's when it really hit me. I wasn't just some guy she used to know. I was still a wound she never properly closed. She started walking toward me slowly, hesitantly. The people around her blurred as she made her way across the room. Her heels clicking against the polished hotel floor, shaky but determined. Her mouth was opening and closing like she was trying to speak but couldn't summon the words. I didn't say anything. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at her and waited. When she finally stopped in front of me, I saw it. Her eyes weren't just filled with tears. They were filled with panic, with disbelief. And beneath it all, something else. Something I couldn't place yet. "Erwin," she whispered. "You're here. You're real." My voice was low. "Last time I checked." She laughed through the tears. "A short, broken thing. I didn't know you'd be here. I swear I didn't know." "I'm not here for you, Qley," I said, and immediately hated the way my voice cracked just a bit when I said her name. She reached out like she was going to touch my arm but then pulled back. "You look different." I wasn't sure what that meant. Maybe she noticed I'd lost weight or that I'd finally let the gray streak stay in my hair. Maybe she just meant I no longer looked like the man who used to make her oatmeal in the mornings and rub her feet after long days. That man was long gone. "You too," I said. She laughed again, more bitter this time. "No, I don't. I've just gotten better at pretending." That line stayed with me longer than I care to admit. Gotten better at pretending. As if everything she was now, a woman in heels and a tailored suit with tears streaking down her cheeks at a corporate event, was just an illusion wrapped in eyeliner and salary bumps. She looked around quickly and said, "Can we talk, please? Somewhere quiet." And that's where the war inside me started. Every rational bone in my body screamed, "No!" What did I owe her? A conversation? Closure? She made her choice. She left. She didn't call, didn't write, just vanished like I'd been nothing more than a phase she outgrew. But the look in her eyes, it wasn't fake. It wasn't theatrical. I'd lived with that woman for over a decade. I knew her real from her fake. And this wasn't the latter. I nodded. We found an empty hallway behind the conference room, dimly lit, lined with posters of past events, and smelling faintly of carpet cleaner and tired ambition. She leaned against the wall and crossed her arms as if bracing for something hard to hear. "I don't know how to say any of this," she began. "Then don't," I replied. "You don't owe me anything. You made that clear when you left." Her eyes darted to mine. "Erwin, I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because I stopped knowing who I was." I scoffed. "I didn't mean to. It just slipped out." She continued anyway. "I know that doesn't excuse what I did. Gavin, he wasn't some great love. He was an escape, and it turned out he was never who I thought he was. I left you for a fantasy, and it turned into a nightmare." I stayed quiet. I thought if I could just get away from the life I felt trapped in, I'd be happier. I blamed the wrong things. You, our home, even Marvin. But it wasn't you, Erwin. It was me. And I made the biggest mistake of my life trying to fix that by running. Her voice broke on that last word. I watched her wipe her cheek with her sleeve, her mascara smearing like ink on wet paper. "I heard you moved, disappeared," she said. "No one could find you. Not even Julia from HR, and she's practically a private investigator." "I needed space," I said. "From everything. From everyone." "I get it," she sniffled. "You probably hate me." "I don't." I meant it. "But I don't think I trust you either." She nodded like she expected that. "I just needed to say I'm sorry, even if it's 3 years late." A strange silence stretched between us. Not the cold, bitter kind. A tired kind, like two people who had shouted everything that needed shouting long ago and were left with only the whispers. That's when she reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It was of Marvin. My Marvin, sitting on a porch I didn't recognize. "I found him again," she said quietly. "After Gavin and I split, he ran away during the move, and I thought I lost him forever. But I got a call from a shelter a month ago. He had a chip still listed under my old number. He's safe." He's with me. I stared at the photo longer than I expected to. That cat had been more emotionally available than most people in my life, and I hadn't seen him since she walked out. Can I see him sometime? I asked before I could stop myself. She smiled through her tears. I'd really like that. We stood there in silence, neither of us knowing what this moment meant or where it would lead. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than numb. And for someone like me, that was everything. That night, after the event, I didn't go straight back to my room. I walked around the hotel's perimeter, out onto the sidewalks of downtown Denver, passing glowing restaurant windows filled with laughter and strangers clinking glasses. I didn't hear any of it. I was somewhere else, back in our kitchen, watching Qley pour kibble into Marvin's bowl while humming off-key. Back in that little living room with the saggy couch cushions, where she'd curl up with a blanket and let her feet sneak under mine when she was cold. I'd spent years trying to seal those memories in concrete, and somehow, in a 15-minute hallway conversation, she cracked them wide open again. I didn't sleep much. My brain wouldn't turn off. Everything she'd said spun around in circles. How she left because she was lost. How Gavin wasn't some passionate escape but a mistake that burned her life to the ground. How she'd found Marvin again, like some strange symbol of fate dragging the past back into focus. The next morning, she texted me. I hadn't realized she still had my number. Still in town? Yes, I replied. Want to meet Marvin? I stared at the screen for a while. I could have said no. I could have blocked her and pretended none of it ever happened. But something in me wanted to see the one thing we'd both loved without complication. So that afternoon, I took a cab to her Airbnb on the other side of the city. It was a quaint place, nothing flashy. A small brick bungalow with a tiny porch, wind chimes, and a welcome mat that looked too new to have been hers. She met me outside, dressed casually this time, no makeup, hair in a messy knot. Her eyes were still red from crying the night before, but there was something softer about her, less polished, more like the woman I remembered. Inside, it smelled faintly of lavender and old books. And there, perched on the windowsill like a king reclaiming his castle, was Marvin. He looked older, scruffier, but when he saw me, he jumped down, trotted over, and meowed that same grumpy meow I used to hear every morning before the alarm. I knelt down and scratched under his chin. He purred instantly, headbutting my hand like we'd never missed a day. I didn't mean to cry, but I did. Quietly, Qley stood nearby, saying nothing, just watching with that same look from the event, torn between heartbreak and relief. He remembered you, she whispered. Guess I never really left his world, I said. She poured coffee for us both, and we sat on opposite ends of the couch. There was an awkwardness to it, like two people meeting again after a war no one won. I expected her to dive into more apologies or try to explain things again, but she didn't. Instead, she asked about me, what I've been doing, where I lived, if I was seeing anyone. I answered honestly. I told her about my apartment over the florist shop in Boise, about how I spent a year eating frozen dinners before finally learning to cook real food, about how I took up journaling, not because I was good at writing but because I didn't have anyone else to talk to. No one? She asked. I shook my head. I cut everyone off. Even Julia. Qley sighed. She still asks about you, you know? She told me once that she thought I'd done something irreversible. I raised an eyebrow. And did you? She didn't answer, just looked down into her coffee like the answer was floating at the bottom of the cup. Then she pulled something else from the side table, a folder. Inside were printed therapy notes, pages and pages of sessions. Her handwriting was all over them. Highlights, questions, margins filled with scribbles. I've been going to therapy since Gavin left, she said. Almost 2 years now. I didn't know how much damage I'd caused to myself, to you, until someone forced me to look at it. It's not an excuse, but I wanted you to see. I didn't just walk away and stay gone. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to say anything. So, she added, I didn't bring you here to win you back, Erwin. I know I lost that right a long time ago. I just needed you to know I didn't forget you. I didn't forget who we were. I looked at her for a long time, This wasn't the same woman who left me with a forward note and vanished. This was someone who had collapsed, broken, and clawed her way into some kind of clarity. She was older now, not just in years, but in spirit. And so was I. "Marvin seems happy," I said. She smiled. "He's complicated, but he's still ours, if that means anything." I stayed a little longer. We talked about movies we used to love. She made a joke about how I never understood the endings, and I joked that she never understood why I cried at the sad parts. For an hour or so, it felt like time had bent backward, like we were just Erwin and Qley again before things went sideways. But I didn't stay the night. Couldn't, and she didn't ask me to. When I stood up to leave, Marvin followed me to the door and pawed at my shoe. I picked him up one last time and kissed the top of his head. Then I looked at her. "Take care of him." "I will," she said. "And thank you for coming." As I stepped into the cold Denver air, the door closed behind me softly. Not like a slammed ending, more like a page turning. I wasn't sure what had just happened between us. Closure? A reopening? Something in between. But for the first time in years, my heart wasn't silent, and that terrified me more than anything. 2 days after the visit to Qley's Airbnb, my work conference wrapped up. I should have been focused on packing, booking my return flight, and getting my notes in order, but every spare moment kept drifting back to her. Her voice, that look in her eyes, the way she set down the therapy notes like proof of effort or guilt, or maybe both. I hated how quickly those emotions had found room inside me again, like they'd been quietly waiting in the attic for someone to lift the dust-covered sheet. That afternoon, just after I checked out of the hotel, a message popped up on my phone. "Qley, hey, I know I probably shouldn't ask, but if you're still around tonight, would you have dinner with me?" I stared at it for so long the screen dimmed. Everything in me knew this was a bad idea. I wasn't the guy who took bold risks. I was the guy who microwaved soup, read ingredient labels, and still sorted socks by color. Saying yes felt like opening a door that had been bricked up for a reason. But saying no, that felt like pretending the last few days hadn't shaken something loose in me. So, like a fool, or maybe just a man who missed being seen, I said yes. She picked the place, a little Italian restaurant on a quiet block, nowhere fancy, the kind where they still bring out warm bread in baskets and know your name after 2 visits. She was already seated when I arrived. Same red curls, loosely pinned this time, a navy blouse, and no lipstick. She didn't look like the woman from the event. She looked like the woman I used to fall asleep next to every night for 14 years. "Hey," she said, standing. I nodded. "Hey." We sat, ordered wine. I went for water instead. My stomach was a knot pretending to be a person. We talked. Not about the past. Not at first. Just regular things. What our jobs were like, how small Boise could feel, how weird it was that we both ended up back in Colorado, even if briefly. She told me she was now freelancing as a brand strategist. Said she hadn't worked for anyone but herself in over a year. "I used to think I needed a ladder," she said. "Now I just want a window." I didn't fully get it, but I nodded like I did. I'd forgotten how metaphor-heavy she could get when she was trying to sound reflective. Then came the shift, the silence between stories, the way her hands slowed on her napkin. I knew the moment was coming before she even opened her mouth. "Erwin, what I said the other night about not wanting to win you back. I meant that. I know I don't get that kind of chance again. But..." She trailed off, breathing slowly, collecting something heavy from her chest. "I think about what we had every single day. And sometimes I wish I could just rewind time to the moment before I ruined everything." I didn't know what to say. There was no easy line for that. No clean reply. She stared into her wine glass like it might help her disappear. Gavin wasn't who I thought he was. It wasn't even romantic. It was chaotic. He didn't love me. I don't think he loved anyone. He used me to feel powerful. And when he left, he took everything. My savings, my security, my ability to believe I could trust anyone again. "And you want what from me, Qley?" I asked softly. She looked up. "Not forgiveness. Not even friendship, if that's too much. I just needed to look you in the eyes and tell you that I know what I did. That I broke something good. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. The thing is, I could hear the truth in her voice. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, exhausted, like someone finally stopped trying to rewrite the story and just decided to tell it honestly, even if it made them the villain. "I'm not the same man you left," I said after a long pause. She nodded. "And I'm not the same woman. That's what scares me." That stopped her. She tilted her head slightly, brows knitting together. "Because I don't know if what we used to have could even exist anymore. And even if it could, I don't know if I'd want to hold it again. It hurt too much the first time." She sat back, exhaling slowly. "I get that. I really do." We finished dinner mostly in silence. Marvin came up again, of course. She showed me a video of him chasing a laser pointer. He looked as clumsy as ever. Somehow that brought an actual smile to my face. As the check came and I insisted on splitting it, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine just for a moment. Not to hold it, just to rest there like she was checking to see if I'd disappear again. "Goodbye, Erwin," she said. I stood. "Goodbye, Qley." And I meant it. I walked outside into the Denver night. Cold air on my face, stars above buildings, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was finally walking towards something else. Whatever it was, it would be mine this time. The flight home was quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around your ribs and tightens with every hour you pretend you're not thinking about something or someone. I sat by the window, headphones in, pretending to listen to a podcast I didn't even start. I was trying not to replay her voice, not to see her face when she said goodbye, not to feel that impossible warmth from her hand, even though it only rested on mine for a second. I'd meant it when I said goodbye. I really thought I'd closed the chapter, but it turns out some books have loose endings once you keep dog-earing them even after you've shelved them. Back in Boise, everything felt smaller. The apartment, the streets, the routine. My plants had wilted a little. The fridge hummed too loud, and Marvin's absence punched me in the chest more now than it ever had. I hadn't realized how much hope I'd locked into seeing him again until I remembered I had no real reason to go back. For the next few days, I sank into routine like it was a life raft. I went back to work. I kept my phone off more than on. I deleted the photo of Marvin that Qley had texted me. I told myself that it was done. Wrapped up, buried, but it didn't feel like healing. It felt like avoidance wrapped in stubbornness. Then, 3 days after I got home, I found the envelope. It was sitting inside my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in blue pen. The handwriting was unmistakable. I nearly threw it away. I even walked it to the trash can in my kitchen. But something about the weight of it, not literal but emotional, made me pause. I opened it. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten, slanted and imperfect and full of smudges like she'd been crying while writing it. I didn't sit down to read it. I stood there in the kitchen under the buzzing ceiling light and let the words hit me one by one. She started with an apology, but not the kind you offer to get closure. The kind you offer knowing it changes nothing. She talked about the weight she'd carried these past 3 years. How she woke up every morning and thought about the last night we'd shared in our home. How she used to talk to Marvin about me like I was still somewhere in the next room, just waiting to be needed again. Then she confessed something I hadn't known. Apparently, Gavin hadn't just left her. He'd emotionally manipulated her, controlled her finances, isolated her. She didn't share the details, but she hinted at moments that made my skin crawl. She wrote that she didn't want pity, only for me to understand how low she had to fall before she realized how far she'd strayed from the person she used to be, from the person I once knew. The second page was harder. She told me about the night she drove past our old house. It had new owners now, a new coat of paint, wind chimes on the porch. She said she parked across the street and cried because she could still see us inside, eating noodles on the floor after we couldn't agree on a dining table, arguing over which Netflix show to binge, making stupid plans to adopt a second cat. She wrote, "That house still holds you in its walls, but not me. I don't deserve to be there anymore." The final page was short. She said she didn't expect anything. She wasn't asking for forgiveness or a second chance or even a reply. She just wanted me to know the truth, that she was sorry deeply, permanently. that she'd be better for the next person, but that no one would ever quite be me. At the bottom, she signed it, "With more honesty than I gave you then, Qley." I stood there for a long time. Then I sat down and read it again, and again, and again. It wasn't about rekindling something. I knew that. This wasn't a rom-com script waiting for a final act twist. This was a woman who'd broken something real and was trying, piece by painful piece, to own it fully. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw it away either. That night, I pulled out the old box from my closet. The one I swore I'd never open again. Inside were traces of a life I thought I'd erased. A Polaroid of us on a beach in Oregon. A stub from the first concert we went to. A silly card she wrote me after I got food poisoning and blamed it on her experimental lasagna. I sat on the floor and read through it all. And somewhere between the memories and the letter, I stopped feeling like a ghost. The next morning, for the first time in months, I cooked breakfast for someone. Even if it was just myself. Eggs, toast, real butter. I even put on music while I did it. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew what it didn't mean. It didn't mean I was broken anymore. 2 weeks passed. Not a word from Qley. No more texts. No photos of Marvin. No accidental just checking in messages. Nothing. Her letter sat tucked inside the bottom drawer of my desk beneath old tax forms and expired coupons. I told myself I didn't think about it, but I caught myself rereading it twice. Okay, maybe 5 times. It became a strange kind of companion. One that whispered guilt but also, unexpectedly, comfort. Then, just when I started to feel the dust settling, the email came. Not from her, from Julia, Qley's old friend and my former coworker back in North Carolina. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since I'd sent out that awkward group text telling everyone I was taking space. Most people respected that. Julia apparently still had me in her address book. Her message was short, but it hit harder than expected. Subject: Event invitation Julia and Derek. Hey Erwin, I know it's been a long time, but I wanted to reach out personally. Derek and I are finally getting married after a ridiculous 6-year engagement, and we're having a small reception near Asheville in a few weeks. It would mean a lot if you came. Qley might be there. I wanted to be upfront about that. No pressure. Just thought you should know. Hope you're well. You've been missed, Julia. I read it 3 times. My first instinct was a hard no. Why on earth would I willingly step back into a circle of people who remembered me as the man whose marriage quietly imploded, who disappeared without saying goodbye, who couldn't even hold on to his cat? The idea of walking into a room full of old memories, side glances, whispered updates, it made my chest tighten. But there was something about Julia's wording. You've been missed. A strange phrase. Not, we hope you're doing well. Not, it would be fun. No, you've been missed. I didn't realize how hungry I was to hear that until I saw it. I let the email sit in my inbox for 4 days before I responded. Subject: Invitation. Thanks for thinking of me, Julia. I appreciate the honesty about Qley. I'll come. Erwin. The week leading up to the trip was chaos. Not outwardly, just in my head. I'd stand in front of my closet for 20 minutes staring at shirts. I cleaned the apartment like someone was coming to inspect it. I even Googled how to look good without trying too hard. Like I was some clueless teenager getting ready for a prom he didn't want to attend. When the day came, I drove instead of flying. Something about the road felt right. Like I needed the miles to mentally prepare, to stretch the space between me and my past. I stopped at too many gas stations, ate bad sandwiches, listened to old playlists we used to put on during road trips. I skipped every sad song. Almost. The reception was at a vineyard, modest but beautiful, perched on a hill with a view that rolled out for miles. I wore a jacket I hadn't used in years. I parked far from the entrance and sat in my car for a full 10 minutes before stepping out. People noticed me. Some did double takes. A few smiled. One woman I barely remembered hugged me like I'd just returned from war. I moved through it politely, quietly, like a man walking through a museum of old lives. Then I saw Julia. She looked genuinely happy to see me. Not the fake. I didn't think you'd come kind. She hugged me tight, like I'd come home. Erwin, she said, stepping back. You look grounded. That's a weird word, right? But you do. Thanks, I said. You look like someone who finally stopped canceling weddings. She laughed and punched my arm. Derek's around here somewhere, probably hiding from my mother. Drinks are over there. And yes, she's here. I nodded. I already knew. I'd felt it the moment I stepped out of the car. You don't spend 14 years with someone without developing a radar for their presence. It wasn't long before I saw her. Qley stood near the edge of the patio, drink in hand, talking to someone I didn't recognize. Her hair was shorter now, wavy and loose. She wore a light blue dress. She looked older, softer. Not worn down, just quieter in her energy. She saw me. We didn't speak at first, just a glance, a half smile from her, a slight nod from me. She didn't rush over, and I didn't make my way toward her either. We were like magnets still trying to figure out which side would attract and which would push away. The sun dipped low. Someone clinked a glass for speeches. Julia and Derek made the usual rounds of thank yous, laughter, the obligatory awkward joke from the best man. Afterward, Qley approached. I didn't know if you'd come, she said softly. You were warned. She smiled. Yeah, but knowing and seeing are different. We stood there silent, the music soft behind us, the mountains in the distance catching the last glow of sunlight. Can I walk with you? She asked. I nodded. We drifted away from the crowd toward the fence line where the vines started to climb. She didn't speak for a while, just walked beside me like we used to on Sunday mornings when neither of us needed to fill the air. Finally, she stopped and turned to me. I meant what I wrote. I know. I never thought I'd see you again. And now that you have? I don't know, she whispered. Part of me wants to believe there's still something buried under all this silence. And the other part knows I lost the right to ever ask. She looked away. Her voice trembled. You were the only real thing in my life. And I ran. I studied her. The pain was real. The remorse. But also, for the first time, I saw the cost of it etched into her. Erwin? She said, voice cracking. Do you hate me? Took me a long time to answer. No, I finally said. But I don't know if I remember how to love you either. Her eyes shimmered. She didn't cry this time, just nodded like she'd been waiting to hear that. And then, in the middle of a vineyard wedding, with the stars starting to blink awake overhead, we stood side by side. Not as husband and wife, not as strangers, but as two people who had once shared everything, now sharing the weight of what couldn't be rebuilt. Sometimes that's all you can do. We didn't mean to stay after the wedding ended. Most people trickled out once the lights dimmed and the music slowed. Cars crunched over gravel in the dark as laughter faded into the night. Julia gave me one more warm hug, whispered something like, I'm proud of you for coming, and disappeared into the crowd with Derek, her white dress picking up dirt from the edge of the path. And still we stayed. Qley and I were left standing near the empty bar under strings of lights that swayed in the soft breeze, illuminating the two of us like some bittersweet painting. Neither of us suggested leaving. Neither of us wanted to say the thing that would pull the curtain down on this strange, fragile night. I don't know why this feels so heavy, she said at last. Her voice was low, like she didn't want the trees to overhear. We've already said goodbye more than once. Because this one might actually stick, I replied. She didn't answer right away, just looked down at her shoes, then up at the stars. You know what I regret most? She finally asked. It wasn't the cheating. That was awful, yeah, but it wasn't the worst. It was how quiet you were after. You didn't scream or break things. You just stopped being alive. And I knew I did that to you. I made you disappear. I clenched my jaw. She was right. And hearing her say it out loud made it worse somehow. I hadn't realized how much I'd craved her acknowledgement of that exact thing. That she didn't just leave me. She took pieces of me with her. After you left, I said, my voice tight, I used to make coffee for 2 out of habit. I'd pour yours and just let it sit there until it went cold. I don't know why. Maybe part of me hoped you'd walk in like nothing happened. Or maybe I just didn't know how to live without pretending you were still there. Her face collapsed like she was barely holding it together. She stepped closer, And for a moment, I thought she might try to touch me again, but she didn't. She just stood close enough to feel real again. I have an early flight tomorrow, I said, driving back to Boise. You want to crash at my place? She asked it like someone offering a bandage they knew wasn't enough. I should have said no, but I didn't. Her rental was only 15 minutes away. A small cabin tucked between trees, meant for vacationers and couples who still made breakfast for each other. She unlocked the door and stepped aside to let me in. The smell of pine and old wood hit me, along with a wave of something older. Nostalgia, maybe, or the memory of her shampoo. Marvin wasn't there. She had left him with a sitter, and part of me was thankful. I wasn't sure I could handle seeing him again. Not that night. She poured tea instead of wine. We sat by the fireplace, the silence stretching between us, filled with unsaid things and shared ghosts. I watched the fire reflect in her eyes as she stared into it like it might burn away her shame. "Erwin," she said softly, "can I ask you something honest?" I nodded. "If I hadn't left, would you still love me the same?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was sharp. "No," I said, "because the woman I loved wouldn't have left." Her eyes closed slowly. "But I still miss her," I added. "Even now." She looked at me then. Really looked. Her face raw. Not the polished version I'd seen at the event. Just her. Scared, honest, human. We didn't kiss. There was no passion, no dramatic rush toward each other. Instead, we just sat there until the fire died down. At some point, she got up, grabbed a blanket from the linen chest, and laid it over me without a word. I closed my eyes, fully clothed, stretched across the couch like a ghost waiting for the sun. I heard her footsteps fade toward the bedroom, heard the click of the door, and then silence. That was the last night we ever spent under the same roof. In the morning, when I woke up, she was gone. She left a note on the counter, scribbled in the same familiar hand as the letter from Boise. "You deserved peace. I hope I didn't steal it again. See." I folded it neatly, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and left without touching anything else. No goodbyes, no final looks, just the sound of my car engine and the weight of everything we never truly fixed pressing against the steering wheel as I drove away from the last pieces of her I would ever hold. But for once, I didn't feel empty. I felt done. And that was enough. The road home felt different this time. Less like an escape and more like a return, not just to a place, but to myself. I drove through long stretches of silence, letting the hum of tires and the wind carry off whatever pieces of Qley still clung to my thoughts. There were no fantasies of reconciliation, no imagined what-ifs, just clarity in a strange, steady calm that I hadn't felt in years. When I got back to Boise, the apartment felt smaller, but in a good way. Warmer, familiar. I opened the windows, let the spring air sweep through, and stood for a long moment just breathing it in. The last traces of her, the photo, the letter, the old box. I didn't throw them out, but I didn't need them anymore. They went back into storage, not as wounds, but as history. A few weeks later, I walked into a bookstore on a quiet Saturday afternoon, looking for nothing in particular, just browsing. A woman at the counter dropped a stack of poetry books and laughed to herself. That laugh, it wasn't Qley's. It was brighter, newer, untouched by the weight of shared mistakes. She glanced at me and smiled. "Erwin, right?" she said. I blinked. "Yeah, sorry. Do we know each other?" "I used to work at the co-op across the street. You always ordered those weird turmeric drinks. You tipped in exact change." I laughed. "That sounds about right." Her name was Maris. She had a quiet kindness about her. We talked for 15 minutes standing between biographies and fantasy novels. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a rom-com moment. But it was easy, real, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We exchanged numbers, texted a few days later, then met for coffee, then dinner, then more. One night, sitting on my couch, she asked about the photo of a grumpy-looking cat on my fridge. "That's Marvin," I said with a grin. "He lives with someone else now, but he saved my life once." She looked at me for a moment, like she could see the edges of a story I wasn't quite ready to tell. And instead of asking, she said. He looks like the kind of cat who knows things. Yeah, I said. He really does. Months passed. Maris and I took things slow. No rushing. No grand declarations. Just the quiet, steady building of something honest. I told her everything eventually, about Qley, about the letter, about the night at the wedding. She didn't flinch or pull back. She just listened, then held my hand and said, "Sounds like you finally let go of something that was never meant to carry you forever." And she was right. I still think about Qley sometimes, not with pain, but with understanding. She was a chapter, a long, messy, beautiful, painful chapter, but not the end. The end is still being written, and for the first time in years, I'm excited to see where the story goes.